Did you ever notice how the most powerful person in the room is rarely the loudest? They don't need to be. And if you think about it, really think about it, how many times have you watched someone unravel just because they couldn't shut up? Just because they couldn't sit with silence? We live in a world where everyone is yelling, posting, oversharing, competing to be heard. But what if I told you that your true strength, your true advantage, lies in saying nothing? There's a silence that's weak, the kind that comes from fear, and then there's a silence that's royal, strategic, dominant. That's the kind I'm talking about. The kind of silence that makes people lean in. The kind that makes them wonder about you. When you walk into a room and say nothing, but your presence commands attention, that is the royal power of silence. Most people think silence means you're being passive. But let me tell you the truth, silence is a weapon. And it's the most underestimated one. When you remain silent in a world that demands reaction, you become unpredictable. You become unreadable. You become powerful. Silence is not the absence of strength. It's the evidence of mastery. Silence isn't about shrinking. It's not about hiding. It's about positioning. You don't need to speak just because there's a pause. In fact, that's where most people give themselves away, in the noise they create trying to fill silence. But when you can sit in that quiet moment, unfazed, unshaken, that's when people start paying attention. Strategic silence is powerful because it's intentional. It's not the silence of someone afraid to speak. It's the silence of someone who knows they don't have to. In every room I've walked into, whether it was a high-stakes interrogation or a tense diplomatic meeting, the one who stayed quiet the longest usually had the most leverage. Why? Because they weren't reacting. They weren't explaining themselves or begging to be understood. They were observing, calculating, choosing their moment, and when they finally spoke, everyone listened. That's the difference between being silent out of fear and being silent out of strength. You don't move unless it matters. You don't speak unless it shifts the energy in the room. Most people speak to prove they're right. But when you're strategic, you don't need to prove anything. You already know. And when you operate from that place, you become immune to noise, to criticism, to distractions. You become the one everyone else adjusts to. Because you didn't just master what to say, you mastered when to say it. That's not passivity. That's power. When you walk into a room and you're the loudest one there, people might look at you, but they don't necessarily respect you. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't beg to be noticed. The person who truly holds the room is the one who doesn't say a word, but whose energy makes everyone shift. They don't compete for attention. They command it. That kind of presence comes from within. It comes from knowing who you are so deeply that you don't need validation, approval, or applause. You sit back, you observe, and the room responds to you. People underestimate the power of restraint. They think silence means you've got nothing to say. But the truth is, it means you're choosing not to say it. That's influence. Because when everyone else is talking, defending, performing, you're simply watching. And while they're trying to be seen, you're already in control. That's the kind of silence that builds presence. Not the kind that hides, but the kind that dominates. The quiet one who sees everything, hears everything, and gives nothing away. That's the person everyone silently watches. That's who they measure themselves against. That's who they think twice before challenging. When you hold yourself like that, calm, composed, unshaken, you shift the power dynamic. You don't have to interrupt or overpower anyone. You let the silence do the work. That kind of control doesn't just happen. It's built. It's earned. And when you master it, you no longer chase influence. You become the influence. There's a cost to speaking every time you're triggered. Every time you react, every time you explain, defend, or argue, you give away a piece of your energy. And here's the truth. Not everyone deserves access to your energy. Some people aren't looking for clarity. They're looking for chaos. And the more you respond, the more you feed it. Silence is not just about power. It's about protection. It's how you guard your peace, your clarity, your emotional control. You've got to learn to recognize when your voice is being pulled into spaces where it's not respected. When you keep responding to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you burn out. You're left drained, resentful, off balance. But when you decide to stay silent, not out of defeat, but out of intention, you take back your control. You stop bleeding energy into conversations that go nowhere. You stop watering dead plants. You stop fighting to be seen by people who've already chosen to stay blind. And it's not easy. It takes discipline to choose silence when every part of you wants to react. But discipline is what separates power from impulse. The moment you realize that you don't need to prove your point to anyone, that's the moment you free yourself. You stop dancing for people's approval. You stop explaining your worth. Your silence becomes your boundary. It says, I've seen enough. I've said enough. I know who I am. And that's when people begin to realize they can't shake you, because your peace is no longer up for grabs. We've been conditioned to believe that openness equals connection. That if we just share more, our goals, our plans, our pain will be understood, validated, accepted. But here's the reality: the more you put out, the more people can twist, question, and use against you. Oversharing is not a sign of authenticity, it's often a sign of insecurity. Real power knows when to hold back. When you protect your inner world, you protect your edge. You don't need to tell people what you're building. You don't need to announce every move. Every dream doesn't need an audience. In fact, the more private you are with your intentions, the more secure they become. Privacy is power, because when people don't know what you're doing, they can't interfere. They can't doubt it, sabotage it, or water it down with their fear. The less they know, the less control they have, and the more focused you stay. It's easy to talk about what you're going to do, but there's nothing more threatening than the person who moves in silence and then delivers. That's when people sit up. That's when they realize you weren't looking for approval. You were already working, already winning. You don't need applause. You need discipline. You need tunnel vision, and that means guarding your energy, your ideas, your progress like it's sacred. Because it is. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table, and they certainly don't deserve access to the blueprint of your life. So keep it to yourself. Let them think you're quiet. Let them underestimate you. That silence. That privacy. That's where the real momentum is building. And when the results show up, you won't need to explain a thing. There's a reason mystery has always been linked to power. When people can't read you, they can't predict you. And when they can't predict you, they can't control you. Silence makes you unreadable. And in a world where everyone is busy exposing their every thought, every move, every emotion, being unreadable is a tactical advantage. People are obsessed with figuring others out. They want to label you, box you in, define you. But when you withhold just enough, when you master the art of subtlety, you become something they can't quite place. And that rattles them. The moment someone thinks they know everything about you, they stop respecting your depth. They assume they've got you figured out. And that's when they stop listening. But when you hold something back, when you let them guess, they lean in. They become alert. They wonder, what's going on behind those eyes? And that's exactly where you want them. Not because you're trying to be deceptive, but because you understand the value of keeping your cards close. You don't need to reveal your story to earn credibility. You don't have to explain your silence. Let people fill in the blanks. Let them make assumptions. Because while they're speculating, you're moving. You're growing. You're evolving. And the truth is, people fear what they don't understand. They respect what they can't control. They watch what they can't predict. Silence allows you to hold that position without ever raising your voice. You want to be unforgettable. Stop oversharing. Stop explaining every decision, every feeling, every goal. Let your aura speak before your words ever do. That's how you build power without shouting. That's how you become someone who doesn't just enter the room, but owns it. Quietly, intentionally, unapologetically. It's in the heat of the moment where most people lose themselves. Someone pushes a button, throws a comment, disrespects you, and you snap. You react. You fire back. And just like that, they've got you. Understand this: the ability to hold your tongue when your ego is screaming to respond is one of the most dangerous forms of strength, because now you are in control. Not them, not the situation, not your emotions. Most people have no discipline over their reactions. They walk around like emotional landmines, ready to explode at the first sign of challenge. But when you can stay centered, When you can breathe, pause, and choose not to give them what they want. That's power. You become untouchable. You stop giving people free access to your triggers. And the truth is, silence in that moment doesn't make you weak. It makes you strategic. Not every insult needs a response. Not every lie deserves clarification. And not every attack requires retaliation. There's a deeper power in being able to look someone in the eye, hear everything they're trying to provoke in you, and still not flinch. That's self-mastery. That's the kind of restraint that breaks people down, because they realize they can't move you. And when someone can't move you, they can't manipulate you. You want to be respected. Don't just speak well. Control when you speak. Control if you speak. You want influence. Show the world that nothing and no one can drag you out of your character. Silence in the face of chaos isn't cowardice. It's command. It's the quiet declaration that says, "You don't decide how I move, I do," while everyone else rushes to speak, to be heard, to insert their opinion into every space. The one who stays quiet is always watching, always calculating, because when you choose silence, you stop giving away information and you start collecting it. That's the secret most people miss. Talking reveals, but silence exposes. People will always show you who they are if you give them the space. And when you stay silent, they start filling in the quiet with their own truths, their fears, their agendas, their insecurities. You see, the human mind hates gaps. It wants to fill silence, fill pauses, fill the tension with something. So when you withhold your words, people begin to overcompensate with theirs. They talk too much. They over-explain. They try to read your silence, and in doing so, they start giving you everything. Their intentions, their weaknesses, their ego. You don't even have to ask. All you have to do is stay quiet long enough for them to unravel. This is especially true in conflict. You sit at a table, someone's trying to push you, provoke you, throw you off center, and you say nothing. You keep your posture, your breath, your calm. And suddenly, they're the ones who start showing their cards. They're trying to provoke a reaction. But the moment you don't give it to them, they start reacting. That's when the mask slips. That's when the truth comes out. Silence is not just protective, it's investigative. You gather intel. You see who's authentic and who's performative, who's trying to dominate the space and who's crumbling under their own insecurity. The loudest person in the room may grab the spotlight, but they also give away the most. You can study someone entirely through what they reveal when you let them speak freely. How often do people tell on themselves without even realizing it? They brag too much. They gossip. They give opinions they weren't asked for. And all of it, is data. They think they're impressing you. What they're really doing is handing you their blueprint. Silence sharpens your ability to read people, to see beyond what they want you to believe. Most people are surface level. They say what sounds right, what earns praise, what hides their true agenda. But when you're silent long enough, you hear the gaps. You notice the contradictions. You sense the hesitation. And you see right through the performance. But you only catch these details when your mouth isn't busy reacting. You only gain that depth when you've trained yourself to stop needing to be the one who always has something to say. Sometimes silence makes people nervous. They don't know how to handle it. They interpret it as judgment, indifference, or even superiority. That discomfort, that's where the real work starts. People scramble to fill it because silence exposes insecurity. It creates tension. It forces authenticity. And most people aren't ready to sit with that. But you're calm. You're intentional. You've made peace with silence, which means you can use it. You can control a conversation without speaking. You can shift a room without moving. You can expose a lie without even asking a question. And here's where the real power is. When you're silent, people project onto you. They assume. They guess. They try to define you based on their own lens, and they end up revealing more about themselves than they realize. Their assumptions say more about them than they ever will about you. And while they're busy trying to figure you out, you already know who they are. That's how you stay 10 steps ahead without ever running. Silence also teaches patience. It trains you to delay the impulse to respond, to react, to correct. You don't jump into arguments. You don't explain your value. You don't hand over your emotional responses for free. You sit with the moment and ask yourself, is this even worth it? Does this deserve my energy? Will this help or hurt me in the long run? That's the advantage of silence. It gives you time to think clearly, without pressure, without emotional cloudiness. The person who can stay still under pressure is the one who holds the power. In interrogations, in negotiations, in leadership rooms, it's never about who speaks first. It's about who listens better, who understands more, who reads between the lines. And none of that is possible if you're too busy trying to be understood. When you stop needing to be seen and start focusing on seeing, really seeing, you start playing the long game, the intelligent game, the game that doesn't just win battles, it wins wars. I've been in rooms where saying one sentence too early would have shifted the entire outcome. And I've been in moments where saying nothing was the most powerful move I could have made. Because people reveal themselves when they don't feel watched, when they believe you're not paying attention. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects who they are. And if you listen close enough, you'll hear exactly what you need to know to protect yourself, position yourself, and powerfully move forward. You don't need to confront everyone. You don't need to correct every lie. When you know the truth, when you've read the room, when you've seen them through their words, you move different. You're not defensive. You're not desperate. You're informed, and that's what makes you dangerous. The more silent you become, the more you notice, not just in others, but in yourself. You start seeing where you give too much, where you explain too often, where you let emotions drive your reactions, and that awareness, that's how growth starts. That's how you begin to lead. Not just others, but yourself. Silence is not a void. It's a mirror, a protector. And when you learn to trust it, it becomes your superpower. So while the world continues to talk, to shout, to overshare, be the one who sees. Be the one who listens. Be the one who doesn't flinch. You will learn more. You will lead better. And you will win. Quietly, intelligently, and without ever needing to raise your voice. Chaos feeds off chaos. It wants a reaction. It wants noise. It wants your emotion, your energy, your panic. But the moment you meet chaos with calm, it loses its grip. That's why calmness is such a threat. It can't be manipulated. And the calmest person in the room is usually the one who sees everything with clarity. While everyone else is scrambling, reacting, spiraling, you're grounded. You're composed. You're in command. When you choose calm over chaos, silence over reaction, you shift the power dynamic instantly. People expect conflict. They expect you to raise your voice, match their energy, argue back. But when you don't, when you simply stand in your silence, it unbalances them. They don't know what to do with someone who won't play their game. It throws them off, because you're not giving them the satisfaction of controlling your emotional state. And that's where your power sits. In your refusal to hand it over. The person who stays calm isn't detached. They're intentional. They're reading every word, every expression, every shift in energy, and making decisions from a place of strength, not emotion. You don't need to be the loudest to be the most influential. You just need to be the most centered. The moment you stop reacting to everything is the moment you start choosing your battles wisely. That's not weakness, it's strategy. Because calmness keeps you thinking clearly. It keeps you aligned with your purpose. It keeps you unshaken when the ground around you is trembling. There's nothing more unsettling to someone who thrives in drama than a person who won't engage with it. Your silence becomes the wall they can't climb, the puzzle they can't solve. And while they spiral trying to pull you into the storm, you stay still. You stay focused. Because your time, your mind, your energy, those are too expensive to waste on emotional volatility. You've worked too hard to give that away for free. Calmness also shows people you know who you are. You don't need to defend every decision or prove every point. You don't need to explain yourself to people who don't operate at your level. When you're calm, it's because you've already made peace with your path. And when you've made peace, you don't get pulled into panic. That kind of self-possession. It's intimidating, because it's rare. Most people don't realize that staying calm isn't something you're born with. It's something you train for. It's choosing every day to not let the world dictate your inner state. It's choosing to observe instead of absorb, to pause instead of pounce. And that restraint, that internal discipline is what gives you long-term control. You don't just react, you respond. And when you do respond, it's with intention, not emotion. That's the kind of calm that leads. That's the kind of calm that wins. Respect doesn't come from how loud you or how often you speak. It comes from how well you hold your ground without saying a word. There is a deep strength in someone who doesn't flinch, who doesn't argue, who doesn't beg to be heard or understood. That kind of silence makes people pause. It makes them reevaluate how they approach you. Because the truth is, when people realize they can't move you, they start respecting you, or fearing you. Either way, they stop underestimating you. Most people expect a reaction. They expect you to explain yourself, to defend your position, to justify your worth. But the moment you stop doing that, you change the dynamic. You teach people, without ever saying it, that your value is not up for discussion, that your boundaries aren't negotiable, and that your time and energy are not available on demand. Silence forces people to sit with their own behavior, and that's uncomfortable for them. But that discomfort is what creates respect. When you don't rise to every challenge, when you don't fight every petty battle, you show that your focus is bigger than the moment, that you've trained yourself to think long-term, that you've elevated past the need for external validation. And when people see that you can't be baited, they stop trying to control you. They recognize that you're not easily accessed, not easily provoked, not easily understood. That unpredictability makes them cautious, and caution leads to respect. People will always test you. They'll push just to see how far they can go. But silence is a wall they can't climb. It holds the line without needing to lift a hand. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to prove it to you. And the more you hold that position, the more they realize they have nothing to grip onto. That's when the power shifts. That's when they start approaching you differently, more carefully, more deliberately, because they know now you don't give yourself away. You don't argue for your place. You own it. So let them talk. Let them assume. Let them try to figure you out while you stay grounded, focused, unshaken. Your silence will speak for you, and it will say everything they need to know. Mastering silence isn't about staying quiet just for the sake of it. It's about building unshakable discipline. It's about being in full control of yourself in moments when most people give themselves away. Anyone can talk. Anyone can vent. Anyone can blurt out how they feel when they're triggered or insecure. But it takes a different kind of person to pause, to breathe, to think before they speak, if they choose to speak at all. That's the kind of self-control that separates strong minds from impulsive ones. Every time you choose not to react emotionally, not to blurt out your plans, not to explain your every move, you're training yourself. You're building a level of mental toughness that becomes your armor. You start realizing how many situations didn't need your voice. They needed your silence. You begin to see how many arguments you avoided simply because you didn't engage. And what that does over time is build confidence. Not the loud, boastful kind, but the deep, grounded confidence that doesn't flinch. The world tries to provoke you. It tries to rush you, pressure you, pull you into urgency. But silence buys you space. It gives you room to respond with clarity instead of emotion. And that pause, that breath, that second of stillness before you act, that's everything. Because in that moment, you decide who you want to be. You either choose reaction or you choose strategy. And the person who consistently chooses strategy, that's the person who gets ahead. Quietly, effectively, on their own terms. Discipline isn't always visible. It doesn't always show up in action. It shows up in restraint. In the ability to say no. To walk away. To hold your tongue when you could destroy someone with a single sentence. That kind of power doesn't scream. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need a stage. It sits in silence and knows its worth. It doesn't chase attention. It doesn't beg to be seen. It just is, and people feel it. Silence also teaches you how to listen, not just to others but to yourself. You hear your instincts more clearly. You notice when something feels off. You sense when a situation demands patience rather than pressure. And because you're not always talking, you start learning. You learn about people. You learn about timing. You learn how to move with precision instead of emotion. That's what discipline gives you. It sharpens your mind. It refines your responses. It elevates the way you lead. So when someone asks what your greatest strength is, don't point to your voice. Point to your silence. Not the kind born from fear, but the kind built on discipline. Because when you can control your words, you can control your outcomes. And in the end, that's what separates the average from the exceptional. Not who talks the most, but who masters the silence between the noise. Silence is not weakness. It's not absence. It's not emptiness. It's presence at its highest level. In a world that constantly pushes you to speak, to explain, react, choosing silence is an act of strength. It's an act of strategy. It's a declaration that says, I'm not here to perform. I'm here to own myself. The person who can sit in silence without need to be understood, without needing to respond, without needing to control the narrative. That person is dangerous. Because they've already mastered the hardest thing of all themselves. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be seen to be effective. Speak less. Move smart. Let your silence carry the kind of weight that noise never could. That's where the real power lies.